That's good. Do I need to have a resolution on those?
Yes, please.
Yes, what is it? That the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Joint Committee receive the action items from previous Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Group Joint Committee meetings report. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mayor Little and Mayor Hazelhurst, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So decision items today. The first one is the election of the chair of the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee, and I am going to vacate the chair and hand proceedings to you.
Yeah, I suppose so.
That was quick.
Okay, all right, Your Worships. I mean, the first matter here is item 1, which recommendation 1, which is the decision is not significant, etc. All those in favour?
Aye. Aye. I'd like to move that
sorry. Yeah.
Councillor Ormsby is the chair of the Joint Committee.
Second that. Third and fourth.
Yes, I'll accept. Thank you.
And if there's no other nominations, congratulations.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Filled up. I'll just put that over.
Hey, that's all right.
So we'll move on to the appointment of the Deputy Chairperson of this Joint Committee, and I'll call for nominations.
We haven't pre-discussed this,
No, we haven't.
Would you like to continue, Alex?
I don't mind being the Deputy, that's fine.
Happy to-
Yep,
happy
move
to
and seconder.
Yes.
All those agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Well done.
No.
You stay. Okay, moving on to the next item. So item 7, the committee terms of reference review and confirmation. Ian.
Yeah, so look, this is really for your information, but given that it's the start of the new triennium, I thought it was best if you confirm those. We've got no recommended changes. If you're happy, then just ask that you pass the resolution.
Any questions or comments? If there are none, can I please have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations 1, 2 and 3? Craig and Kirsten, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Ka pai koutou. Moving on to item 8. We have the Hawke's Bay CDEM Group Joint Committee, Tangoio to Clifton Level 3 Tsunami Modelling. So we have a presentation and a study. Hilda, come up to the front.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce Adam. I'm not too sure whether you've been introduced to Adam before. So Adam is our team leader, risk reduction, basically replacing Lisa Pearce's position. So Adam's got a presentation. So this work actually commenced, was prior to Lisa actually leaving, and we did the work on it, and the final draft arrived just as Adam was actually starting. So Adam's had to bring himself up to speed with the whole thing. So I'll let him go through his presentation, and then there's obviously an opportunity for you to ask any questions if you have any.
Right, thanks Ian. Tēnā koutou. Right, so as Ian said, this started about over a year ago, but we got the report in June 2022, right at the end, and it's taken us a bit of time to work our way through exactly what it meant, because it's a highly technical report. I believe it's been sent out to you all. But the rationale behind this was the last time we had done any sort of modelling on the tsunami impacts was in 2011, so we were overdue, if you like. There have been quite a few developmental changes in the area, in the built environment. We've got new data, new modelling, better computer power, and more importantly, we now have the LiDAR that we can use to do level 3 modelling. We also have added a roughness coefficient which takes into account the built environment and the terrain, whereas before we basically just said, look, if it's 5 meters above sea level and 5 kilometers inland, you'll have that much water. Now we can take into account the whether there were buildings or just wetlands, etc. So what that meant was that the old model essentially had this one flat level of water, inundation, and there wasn't a lot of distinction. In the 2022 model, we are now down to an 11 meter by 11 meter grid, and you can see that on the right-hand side. Both of those are actually of this building here, and on the right-hand side it's much blockier, and you can see that we've got these 11-meter grids with different elevation heights. That might be a little bit hard to see, but essentially we are, where are we, about there. So we're looking at a 1 meter inundation for this particular scenario, and I'll go into the scenarios in a second. So we were able to do a much more refined and nuanced output. The modeling that was used in the old model was essentially, we said, look, in a big earthquake, there'll be this much water at the shore. What happens? In the new model, they run thousands of different mini scenarios to come up with the different earthquakes around the Pacific. And in the wider area, they're using quite a large grid of 3,600 by 3,600 meters, but down in the Napier area, it's 11 by 11. And they've aggregated all of those different earthquakes, different return periods, different wave heights, and come up with these are the aggregated likelihoods at 4 different time periods, or what we call return periods. And again, here I'm just showing the roughness. It's the Manning's coefficient, if anyone wants to get technical, and it just shows the grey area are buildings, so that slows the water down a lot more than, say, a wetland. Right, so we did 4 scenarios, and they were return periods of 100-year, 500-year, 1,000-year, and 2,500-year. Now, of course, these are models and these are averages, so you can't say that every 2,500 years you get this sort of a tsunami. But the models, they range from, at the 100-year return period of a 3-meter wave, and at the 2,500 meter, we're looking at a 14.2 meter wave. Again, however, we are looking at aggregates, we're looking at averages, so it's not one specific scenario. So I've given the maximum wave height expected for that scenario in brackets, so that even though the model uses a 9-meter wave, we could get a 9.2 meter wave. And even then, that's not the worst case, that is the maximum credible event. Yeah, that's about all we need to say. Sorry, got that completely confused. Thank you, Jay, you could have jumped in on that, helped me out. That's the magnitude of the earthquake, not the height of the wave. I was looking at the wrong thing there, should put my glasses on more often. So yeah, the 2,500 year is a 9.0 magnitude, but we could have a 9.2. But for the scenario, for the modeling, we have used 14.2 meter wave heights. We also did 4 sea level rise scenarios. The mean high water spring, which for those of you who are not familiar with that term, is essentially, it's not quite the highest tide, but it's one of your maximum tides in the springtime. So it would actually be about right now, your high tide in the spring. And we took that sea level, and we also took it plus 0.65, plus 1, and plus 1.9 meters. That is probably going to be due to climate change, but it could also be due to a number of other factors. But the most likely one is climate change. In the graph I'm showing here, this is from the IPCC, and it is for Napier, and it's when the likely sea level rises of those 3 sea level rises are going to show up. And I've just put some dotted lines in there so that you can see that the plus 0.65 meters, we're actually expecting in about 50 years' time. And that is at the middle range of the IPCC. At the worst case, it comes in a few years earlier. There's not much difference in the 50-year period. Over the long period, though, like in the 150-year, there starts to be a deviation, significant deviation between the different IPCC predictions, but we are still looking at that 1.99 meter, or basically 2 meters, by the end of the next century. And that will come in quite important in a couple of slides' time. So here's some of the things that we've been able to do with the data that came out of the model. On the left-hand side, we've got the old model, and this is what you'd see on the hazard portal if you went online right now. And on the right-hand side, you've got the new model. Now, as you can see, there is a decreased area of inundation, which is quite significant. There's a number of reasons for that, and if you want me to go into it, I can in the question time. But essentially, it's because the old model was less nuanced and very conservative. And now with more data, you can be more specific. The right-hand side, however, also gives us depths, whereas on the left-hand side, essentially, the old model said if we had 1 millimeter of water, it's called inundation. Now we can actually say, well, what's significant inundation? So not only is there a decreased inundation depth, area rather, there is a decreased inundation depth. So here I've zoomed in a bit onto the area around here, and it's a little bit hard to read in that the oranges and yellows are actually shallow, and the deeper blues are deep water. And you can see here that in the southwest corner of Bluff Hill Hospital Hill, in the old model, we were looking at about 0.5 meter of inundation. In this particular scenario, now it doesn't get wet at all. I do want to repeat, in this model, this is not an actual event. We are trying to predict the future, and we all know there are some vagaries on that, but we do have better modeling now than we did before. So taking a look at the different models, because obviously we had the 4 different sea levels and we had 4 different time periods. This one, I've just picked a few to give an idea. On the 100-year return period, which is on the left-hand side, and compares to a 1,000-year return period on the right-hand side with no sea level rise. There isn't a significant difference. Well, there obviously is for the people who live in the areas that get inundated, but there isn't a huge difference if you're moving from 100-year to 1,000-year. Here we've got the same thing, no sea level rise. On the left-hand side, it's the same slide as I had before. It's the 100-year return period versus a 2,500 year. So that's the big one, that 9.0 magnitude Hikurangi earthquake. And you can see now that the shoreline of Napier does get inundated and overwhelmed, as does some of the areas south of that main overflow channel. Importantly, however, I've now got 2 100-year events, so 100-year return periods on the left and the right-hand side. The one on the right-hand side, however, has a 1 meter sea level rise, which we can expect within the next 100 years. So this is kind of a credible event where, even though it's a relatively low tsunami, we're talking a 3 meter tsunami here, Napier, coastline and marine parade, and quite a bit inland actually, gets quite inundated. So that sea level rise, mostly because of climate change, can sometimes be more important than the actual tsunami event. Doing a close-up, it's the same scenarios. Both of them are the 100-year return period. On the left-hand side, no sea level rise. On the right-hand side, a 1 meter sea level rise. Zooming in on the airport area, and you can see what happens with sea level rise is essentially the coastal barrier that we have, that gravel beach, holds, but the water comes in above Ahuriri into the main channel and overflows down into Tamatea and Onakawa. And there's poor old Clive. Same scenario, 100-year return, left-hand side, no sea level rise, right-hand side, 1 meter sea level rise. And then I've given the kind of the worst case scenario under this modeling. So a 100-year return period. So that's within our children's, grandchildren's lifetime with a 2 meter sea level rise, which we are expecting at the current rates of climate change to be in the middle towards the end of next century. And it pretty much does most of Napier. On the right-hand side is the one that we've always been worried about. It's that once in a 2,500 year, that 9.0 magnitude Hikurangi letting go, but with no sea level rise. That's the one we've been planning for. But on the left-hand side is that one that could happen in 100 years' time. So, that's the basis of the results. We can go into how we got them if you want, but a lot of that is in the report that was sent to you. The next steps that we need to look at, We do still need to do more research, of course. We want to look at the local topographical changes. So the model does take into account changes in land levels due to the earthquake, but not things like a road buckling or a building coming down or those sorts of very fine tuning. And that takes a lot of modeling to be able to take into account. Morphological changes, we're fairly confident at the moment that the Bluff Hill Hospital Hill is going to hold, but we haven't actually done some deep research into things like what happens if you've got a 10-meter wave that then piles up, because it can pile up to 35 meters high, and perhaps contains some logs or a container ship acting like a buzzsaw. We don't have that level. Again, this is very computer intensive. And the recent vertical land movement that came out earlier this year, where we are subsiding in this area just offshore here, I believe it's around 2.4 mil per year, doesn't make a huge impact in that 50-year, but it starts to make an impact over 100 and 150 a year. Even if that data had come out in time, we probably wouldn't have included it, because it is linear. It's just along the coast. It isn't a two-dimensional, and it was every 2 kilometers. It's quite a rough piece of data. We also don't have a clear idea of whether that rate would continue into the future. And then, of course, we need to start looking at social and cultural behavior, not only in terms of the event itself, but even with introducing this new information. How will people react to it and things like that. So we do need to make sure we have a better understanding of how people are aware and how they see the risk, their risk tolerances, because governments, of course, by necessity, have to have a lower risk tolerance than an individual, taking a bigger account of land area and time. So we need to include some of that research. We also need to start talking more with stakeholders. Obviously, we do already, but to make sure that we're getting timely information back and forth, understanding the research needs, like who needs what. And we're talking about lifeline operators, which includes the airport. We're talking about iwi, other councils and things like that, and discussing the ramifications of this new data. The evacuation zones are on the left. These are the current ones that we have. They're based on the old model. And on the right-hand side, we have that maximum credible event, no sea level rise, 2,500 year period. But we do not anticipate making any changes at this point, partly because there's been a lot of time and energy invested into the social buy-in and making people aware and getting councils to agree on where the signs are going to go, what the signs are going to look like. And partly because it's still just a model, and let's not confuse people. They will be safe with the current evacuation zones, and maybe in about 5 years' time, when the existing signs start to rust and everything else, we'll take a look at that. Obviously, we can change that opinion, but right now we don't recommend any changes to the evacuation zone. So, other decisions, though, that are going to be placed onto councils are obviously spatial planning, because it does change a few things. Is this data going to appear on the LIM property reports? How or what, if any, public communications? And, of course, anything else. And that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Adam. And, you know, I'd just like to say a big thank you to you and the team. We've stepped into this role, but, you know, Ian particularly, because this helps inform us in terms of our planning going forward. So thank you very much for that. Did you have a question, Sandra?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Adam. Probably a question really to you, Ian. I'm just really interested in how, I mean, this new information is going to be shared with our community, and nothing in this paper actually identifies that. Yeah. And I have some concerns about the recommendations, and I will make some different recommendations after I hear from you about engagement.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's why we placed it in front of you, is for you, as representatives of the community, to tell us how you want us to communicate this. This information will definitely need to end up on LIMS. That will definitely need to happen because there's inundation. we need to just be clear the difference between inundation levels and evacuation zones, because we project the evacuation zones based on inundation information. So that's basically where we have got to. One of the concerns that we have is primarily we've spent a lot of time and effort over the last few years, in particular around the long, strong, get gone. And what we don't want to do is confuse that message. But at the same time, this level 3 modelling is really aimed at spatial planning, land use planning. And that's really where we think that the focus needs to go on moving forward. In terms of communicating the risk, people already know that there's a tsunami risk. We've already been communicating that over the last 10 years since the previous model, inundation model happened, and then we developed the evacuation zones from there. So there's already, this is not increasing the risk to people. If anything, it's reducing it. So it is a bit of a funny one from that perspective, because usually when you do modelling, it actually increases the risk. But in this particular case, the more information that got put into the model, it actually reduces the risk for some areas.
I think, I'd be far more comfortable if we were able to have a conversation with our communities of interest, like you mentioned, Clive, and Te Wanga and Hamawana and Napier and Ahuriri, and before we discussed the implications, such as LIM reports and things like that. So I think that, this is new information. We've got a final report. It is about hazard risk of the Hikanui Trench and the impact of tsunami. And so anything new, I think it's worth sitting down with our community in their halls and actually sharing some of those this new finding.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. I think where we're at is first round of engagement through us. So we get eyes over it first. Yes. Possibly the next stage could be to our appropriate committees to ask them, how do you want to deliver this to your community through our 2 councils, and then a plan of comms further into the community. So
I wouldn't be comfortable with that direction, through comms. This is actually about bringing our community with us and sitting down, and I'd like to have a community meeting with our community to explain the changes that have been identified in this report before any other considerations were made. This is about our community, bringing them with them and them owning the changes. So I'm happy. I've got some recommendations here that I'm happy to move. Certainly not one that we agree with the decisions, because this is very early stages. But I'm happy with receiving the report. I'm happy with a request councils consider this as new information for future spatial planning. It will be critical. And I'm happy with request councils identify and communicate needs for additional information from CDEM Group Office.
Before we move into that, can I just open up for other questions, and then we'll come back to that. Are there questions or comments from the presentation? Yes.
What's potentially the role of the Coastal Hazards Joint Committee in the communication of this risk profile?
James, could you answer that?
Or has that been entirely focused on climate change effects rather than tsunami effects? It has.
Well, it is it is on both the subsidence of the coastline as well as the climate effects. Certainly, it presents possibly the most efficient vehicle for community engagement, given that there are a series of public meetings planned, but they are very specific to the technical work that's been done for that.
That's good.
If I may, that group, the Coastal Hazard Research Group, I have not yet been able to have a good discussion with them, and that is one of my things I want to do in the next month, actually, is just sit down and look at our data sets and look at that intersect to be able to further the knowledge that we've got.
Can I ask a question around recommendation 5? So I hear the concerns from Sandra about the LIM property reporting and the council's considering adding this to it. I mean, when will this publicly be knowledgeable? And from the regional council's point of view, when will we have to make that publicly available? And I'm thinking about alignment here, so that we're all aligned about the messaging going out and having one set of available information from one council and the timing around that.
Sure.
So can you answer that?
Well, I mean, this agenda is a public agenda,
Yep.
so
Yep.
technically,
It's public today.
yeah. So in terms of my understanding of how the LIM process works, and there are some changes I understand the government's putting in with regards to what goes on a LIM and what doesn't go on a LIM. But my understanding is pretty much when it's you are aware of them, if it's information that you are aware of, and this is produced by GNS, it's a science report, it's been peer reviewed, so the information is there. But I think legally, and there's probably other people in the room who might know more about LIMs than I do, but legally we are supposed to supply it on a LIM if somebody requests it. Bearing in mind we do that at the moment because we already have inundation modelling, albeit a lot broader and a lot more. So this information would replace that information.
That's on the hazards board, excuse me.
Yep, carry on.
Madam Chair, and this will go live onto the hazards portal?
Yes, but we haven't yet.
Right. So that's where the public information to become part of the LIM comes from, is when this data goes onto the computer, the public database.
Yes.
And when will that process happen?
Haven't even started to discuss because we wanted to go through this process first to find out how we want to communicate and things like that. At this point, I would actually like just to make a public thank you to Tim Farrier and his GIS team, because they are essential for all of this information. And we'll be sitting down with them, but we do have Christmas coming up and things like that. I don't see a need to rush into this unless otherwise advised, but I see sometime next year.
Sandra?
Yes, through you, Chair. So those recommendations that I've suggested is about, I must repeat, it's about making sure that our community has had the opportunity to understand the changes in this report. And just putting on a portal next year or just having it received in a public meeting isn't enough in my view.
Any other comments before we take on the recommendations and
So what are you saying,
alter?
go to consultation or something?
Yes, it's a community meeting.
But that's not more than one, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Several.
Okay, so let's move the ones that we agree with. Should we do that? We'll do two
Yes.
rounds. Okay. So it sounds like we're moving 2, 3, 4, and 6.
Not 3,
Not 3.
4, and 6.
2, 4, and 6.
2, 4, and 6.
Happy to move.
Have a seconder for 2, 4, and 6? Yep. All those
You
in.
want to change 3 each year to receive, do you?
Yes.
And then 3 to receive.
Yes.
Would you like to second that as well, Kirsten? No. So we'll move 2, 4, 6, and 3 with those changes. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. So which leaves us 1 and 5. Is that correct? Okay. So Sandra, would you like to make your amendments to 1 and 5?
So I won't move. I don't agree with 1 and 5. At this point in time, I think we could add, so the 6 actually is as councils identify and communicate needs for additional information. And so I think that, it's just about the engagement with our communities to share this information. So I think we could add that. But in terms of the decisions made, we're not at that position yet. So I don't agree with 1 and 5.
Do you think 5 would be that maybe they could come back with more information to see what changes?
I just don't think you need them at this point in time.
Will they in the future at some stage?
Can we defer it to come back to this forum after public consultation?
Through the chair, I think it's important that we have a greater understanding of any potential LIM property report impact. I think we definitely need some further information on that.
Okay. So can we defer that one until we understand the impacts on the council and had advice from our officers around that? Okay. So that deals with 5. And then number 1, defer until the next meeting, and once we have the information from 5.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Okay, I think it does, yes. But I would just like, if we are going to be asked to consult, what are we consulting on? Because it won't be the report, well, it will be the outcome of the report, but not the, which will be the mapping of this. So I'm assuming that's what you're asking us to do?
Yes, it is. And if I look at, for example, the impacts that this has shown on the airport and the port, for example, our key stakeholders for our region, and them understanding the criticality of this report for their expansion, their strategic vision. These conversations need to be shared, and the changes from the modelling need to be shared with across our stakeholders as well as our community. And I think our community would love to see the changes in the modelling because that actually enables them to consider any changes to their properties, any future expansion or extension, where people are going to live. There is a whole lot in here that our community needs to fully understand, and we as shareholders of the airport need to fully understand, and how we and the port actually.
So we have actually, through you, Chair, sorry. It was presented to the last Lifelines meeting. Unfortunately, the airport wasn't there, but the port was. And I think Adam has been talking to the airport about visiting them to discuss this report. I suppose the only comment, that I would make is that they're in an inundation zone now. It's existing. So all this does is just change the modelling around that.
But in terms of strategic, through your chair, through as their expansion and their strategic vision of what the airport will look like in the future. I mean, this is a key document for their.
Alex,
I've got a suggestion, Sandra, that maybe resolution that could help, because I look at this this is a risk management exercise, but we need our community understand before we make any further decisions in the risk management. So I'm wondering if we say requests councils work with Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Group on public education and engagement, including key stakeholders, before further decisions are taken by this group. So request that our councils work with the group to make sure that we work with those key stakeholders and public to do some education and engagement. So it's not about consulting on do we tick yes or no to the report. It's about education and engagement before we then decide to take any further decisions.
Yes, I'm comfortable with that direction.
Yep. Fantastic. So, and that's in replacement of 5? That amendment or that suggestion? Yep. As well as the officers' reports on the impacts that we discussed earlier.
I wouldn't think it would be a replacement through your chair because we've already done that resolution lot.
Yeah.
This would just be an extra to.
An extra one. Okay.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah.
That's great. So if we're all happy with those.
Can you just read them back, please?
So number 1 is obviously going to be deferred because we didn't agree on that one. Number 5 is that we request the councils affected, the officers reporting back on the impact of the consequences of LIM property reports, and that's been added. And then the extra motion of Peter, can you read that out?
Yeah, requesting that councils work with Civil Defence Group for public education and key stakeholder engagement purposes before the Joint Committee takes any further decisions on this matter.
Cool. Everyone happy with that? Yep. All those agree, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. We're on to item 9, which is, thank you very much for the presentation. Operational readiness update. Ian. Oh.
No, he done.
He done.
It's all right.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Koe dan taku noa. Ko te ao team leader operational readiness for the group. This is just an information paper with one recommendation that you receive the report. It's basically just the highlights of our team's activity over the last 6 months. Of note, I would take the opportunity to introduce Valerie, who is our student, first year student, joining us from Victoria University, studying a co-draw law with human rights and international relations. We've also had a new advisor of workforce capability who conducts all of our training and exercising programs. Angela Mensah join us in the team. And then for the rest of the report, I essentially would like to take that as read, but very happy to answer any questions. And maybe I could just highlight or speak to the photos that I've included, which the first one is of the NEMA Awards for volunteers and staff who have completed 10 years of service in the civil defence sector. And so we had 12 volunteers receive 10-year service awards, as well as the group manager, Ian McDonald. The second photo there is a training that we held down in Central Hawke's Bay at the beautiful facility of the Knowledge Hub in Waipa, and had an impromptu visit from the Honourable Kieran McAnulty, who's the Minister of Civil Defence, and also Your Worship, Mayor Alex Walker. The next photo down is an exercise that we ran with the Rapid Relief team of Hawke's Bay. And so that was combined with our volunteers there in the high vis, the yellow, and the Rapid Relief team with the red aprons on. And we set them up in our multi-habitation unit, which was given to us by NEMA as a integratable and very good tent, I guess, that's inflatable and is used by a lot of government agencies as alternative facility, I guess, and so we've got one of those and we put it up. And also the last photo I've got there is just the signing of a memorandum of understanding with Volunteering Hawke's Bay, who has now got a website and a process for bringing in what we call spontaneous volunteers. So these are people who aren't wanting to commit to coming to a training every fortnight or every week, like our committed volunteering team, but are wanting to help out in an emergency, essentially. So this gives us a pathway for them to come in pretty seamlessly, and also leverages the expertise of volunteer management that Volunteering Hawke's Bay has. That's all I'll kind of talk to, but I'm very happy to take questions or expand on any of the ideas or initiatives put forward in the report. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions or comments?
Through the chair, just a comment that I think the Hawke's Bay Emergency Response Team exercise that you did sounds like it would have been very interesting. You know, the sinking of a cruise ship. I don't know if you wanted to share anything further like that exercise with us.
Yeah, this is actually this was a scenario provided by the police search and rescue team. An exercise Rurawa, which they run every 4 years. This is actually the one from 2018, the scenario. And if a big cruise liner went down off the coast of remote Hawke's Bay, and we had people in lifeboats washing up to Hawke's Bay, some of the most remote coastline of New Zealand, what would we do? And I think that would involve our volunteers and a lot of other agencies, and I think it would involve these multi-habitation units as well, because it needs to be like a fully sustainable operation on the coast, likely at Marae. So yeah, that was our scenario, and could happen.
Any other comments? Just a thank you really to you and your team and all the capability building that you're doing, and the partnerships and relationships are so important in terms of the preparedness of our region. So just a big mihi to you and your team. Kia ora. Thank you. Can I have someone move and second receiving the report? Kirsten and Craig, thank you. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. We are on to item 10, community engagement work update.
I'll get Jay to talk to this. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui. Congratulations to your appointment as the chair.
Thank you very much.
In two cases here, it seems. So I will take this as having been read. Sort of as of note, that I emergency preparedness, which is down the bottom of the first page, we had that hui this morning. Went extremely well, had really good participation by FENS, St John's, Te Mene Kōkiri, the iwi and us, and a clear call for this to be a sort of a regular planning group. They are keen to explore community resilience planning being done marae-centric, as in identifying maraes that will be kind of the base of developing the community plan from there, which is a really good idea to explore. There's a lot of potential resource available, and I have sort of said that potentially the resource that we're looking for is people resource. So if there's funding to employ people to help coordinate and drive these programs, that would be fantastic. And so we're going to be working with Te Mene Kōkiri to kind of create a program going forward. Initially they requested that the tai whenua not be invited just at the first hui, just to kind of have us understand where we're at and how to proceed. So they're keen for the tai whenua to come in now to work with presenting what work they are doing. And so we're really looking forward to that, hoping to kind of have it led by Te Mene Kōkiri much the same way. So item number 3, school emergency planning workshops, that is an engagement that is led by Ministry of Education. We used to take a real leadership role in educating schools, but we have kind of created the space for the Ministry of Education to take the lead in that and be the agency that brings it together. And we attend as the subject matter experts as such, and happy to fill any gaps to enable their coordination, but are really wanting them to be the lead of it, and for us to come in and support that. So we're hoping that this space will follow a similar kind of vein, and that we have Te Mene Kōkiri as the correct agency in the space to be providing the space and the coordination with us sort of alongside them. So that was been a really positive event this morning. We're very proud of our Te Hikuaro and Moko continuing to be a story that gives and gives. So we've got had a great community-led translation done by the Indian Mums Club, was fantastic. We had the Cook Highland teachers at one of our early learning centres. We had a church group from the Samoan one, doing these translations for us, take it to the community for feedback, bring it all in and kind of go, yep, we think we've got it. We got them in the studio to record them, so it's just been uploaded onto our website, the narrated versions of these 5 language versions of the book. We work very closely with Auckland Emergency Management on this because they have a big multicultural community that they want to really support as well, and they are going to do a whole lot of a series of books on a similar format on floods and storms. So I'm in their sort of advisory group on that, because we will benefit as well from the resources they develop up there. So again, that was a really, a nice outcome. And then the tsunami kind of space is, of course, always something that's sort of front of mind and busy. We have got an app which had a lot of interest around the country. I know Ian's taken it to other group managers, and we've had other groups approach us. So the GIS team at the Regional Council helped develop an app which we can go around with our phones and collect where we want signs to be, so we know we're in the right place. We might have a community member with us, we might have a council officer with us from the rating team or the parks team, all sort of standing there agreeing. We can take a photo, and then that creates a report that can be shared with their manager, can be shared at a community meeting, so it kind of creates a piece of paper to talk to, which then can influence the decision and agreement going forward of putting signage in that position. So other groups around the country are interested in adopting something similar. It also means that we have a really good record on a map, GIS map, of where all our signs are, and we can see where there's gaps, and we can see that they are in the right place and that sort of thing. So we're very pleased with that as an output. We've had some Tsunami blue lines down in Palongaho put in. We're working on that. There's just been guidelines developed in sort of draft form at the moment by NEMA around this. It's kind of going to become very much nationwide a expectation that communities will consider blue lines to be the best way of saying, and again, controversial, now we've got this new modelling, that you are in or out of the tsunami zone, and then to keep going, but please get here and carry on. So we're working with councils on that. And I know in Napier they've got 2 entering and leaving signs instead of blue lines currently, and they've just approved, I think, 4 more to be put up in the next couple of weeks. So when those next 4 get up, we'll be doing a big press report, working with Hastings as well on that. I know Lenny's taken some up to Wairoa. So we are just really keen for people to have very clear indication physically of where to go to. It's all good to have a information board and a map, but when you're actually running down the road, you want to know you've got far enough. So that's kind of a big piece of work. The information boards, we've got bilingual ones now, so we've been working with our Māori advisors, and we've had support in that space to ensure that they are fit. And again, it's very much based on the community, so I'm working with Waimarama. They've got Jeremy Tatiri McLeod on their marae committee. He's had a look at it, and he's got, so, for Waimarama, could we have changes for this? And of course you can. So we're very much open to every community having their own way of using te reo, and that's all very flexible. And yeah, that's kind of just a continuing big part of what we do. The final part of what we're working on is community resilience planning, and this ties in with the who we had this morning, with all our other partners who are also working in communities. We've created a document, which is a new report, which is in draft. We've had really positive feedback, and Jeremy again has come and given us a whole lot of support with the te reo on that, and we are really sort of hopeful that this is going to be an easier process for people to follow, and that it really clearly states what it is you're going to collect from your information in order to put it into this document. We did a hui at West Shore 2 weeks ago now, and what we did was he actually printed out the pages that you fill in. We printed them as A3 and workshopped them in the meeting, and it worked brilliantly. So in the meeting, they had the A3 sheets, filled them out, we're ready to go, collect them, put it forward, send it back, and go, is there anything else missing? So it really, we'll streamline that process and make it a simpler thing to do. Communities can do it without us if they'd like to, but if they want maps and that sort of stuff put in, then they need to come to us. So that is where we're at.
Thank you so much, Jay. Just out of interest, how many do you have in your team, the community engagement team?
So, on that, I have actually stepped down from my position. So this is my last meeting here. Oh. I'm not going away. I'm going to work part-time to spend more time with my dad and my son. So I'm stepping back, and we're advertising currently for a team leader. Got 1 more week, I think, out there. So if you know any good people to step in. I would be keen to have. Yes.
So it's just yourself, and then
so
who else is in the team?
So I lead the team and look after the Hastings district. We've got Paula down in Central Hawke's Bay. We've got Lenny up in Wairoa, who does half this, half operational readiness, and Paula does the same. She's 0.5 community, 0.5 operational readiness, and we have Pip in Napier, who does full-time community.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments, particularly around the resilience plan? So yeah, Kirsten.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jane, through the chair. Just with regards to the community resilience planning, for a start, I think this is a fantastic tool for our community. We reviewed the document, and I'm thrilled that West Shore's sort of been given the opportunity to give it a test run. Now, I know you're currently seeking feedback. Is there a time frame for when this is likely to be finalised?
Yes, so we're right now compiling the feedback, so it should go to the graphic designer, and I would say by Christmas it should be done. She's quickly turned around things. We're probably 2 weeks away from it being finalised and ready to be draft taken off it.
Excellent,
Yes.
fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? As there are none, I'm sad to hear that you're leaving us part-time, but looking forward to seeing the next presentation, maybe from you or someone new. Yep, cool. Thank you very much. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, Sandra? Alex, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much. So we are trucking along, team. And we have next the strengthening CDEM and Hawke's Bay update. Ian.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this is just a continuation from the last triennium in terms of reporting back to the committee on the implementation of the recommendations of the strengthening CDEM and Hawke's Bay report. So, look, I'm not going to go into any great detail. It was reported to the coordinating executives group about a month ago. Look, we are folding this, though, into the group work program, so the next time you won't get a separate report. It will be one report for the group work program, and these will be folded in within it, just so that you're aware. But we'll use the same formatting, I think, because it seems to be a good format for people. So pretty much going well. We're really in the sort of what I'll call it the business end, the implementation on a number of projects. I mean, it has been a challenging year though, with both my staff being sick and vacancies and new staff coming in, and let alone what is happening in councils at the moment, which is the same as well. So, but we have made steady progress, and there has been really good engagement actually from all of the councils, so it's been quite good. So if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Yeah, any questions for Ian?
It's progressing really well.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. Thank you for that. I'm happy to move. Alex, second. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Carried. We have a group manager's update.
Yeah, so this is just a general update. I think, though, what I'd just like to point out is that group office staffing and review, which we have been discussing in this forum previously, around resourcing in particular. So really, we've started to kick this off. There probably will be some quick wins for us, and we're doing some work on some doing things like improving the retention of existing staff in particular, because that has been really the hard one for us, is losing our experienced staff. It does take a bit of time. It's not like getting a planner in who's already done the qualification usually and has worked as a planner for a while or whatever. You've actually got to teach, you've got to take people through. It takes a good, I think, up to about 12 months before people are fully effective. So losing people is really affects our capability. So we want to broaden the grading of our basic position, so that if people become more senior, that it can actually be recognised, and they can then be remunerated for that. And then that's obviously one of the things in terms of retaining people, along with other stuff as well. So the key thing will be working on what our structure looks like and what capability we need into the future, and we're coming into the LTP round next year. So taking on board a lot of what's being said around this table, around the rural environment, being able to work with communities in the rural, for example, our increased complexities in our operational space. The work that EDUN does has become a lot more complex, technology driven, all of those things. So it will require business cases to be developed. It will require consultation with the councils, particularly the controllers, and then we can work some things through the KEG and then ultimately to this table. So that's the intent moving forward. Other than that, that's basically it. There's a small thing about the Disaster Relief Trust, so just note that there will be a paper coming to each of your councils next year, because the 3 years is up middle of next year, and so you need to approve it for another 3 years in terms of that it's not considered to be a council-controlled organisation, so we don't have to go through all of the reporting that's required for a CCO.
That makes sense. Yep.
Other than that, we're pretty much, that's it, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Ian. I'm just mindful about you mentioning LTP and leading up to LTP.
Yep.
So my question is that leading up to coming to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council LTP only?
Yes, sorry, yes. Yes.
Just clearing that up. So, yeah, I suppose being mindful of that process as regional councillors.
Yep,
Yes,
so I'm
thank you.
fully embedded within the ELT, you know, within that process that the ELT undertakes. So.
Alex?
I think it's important to kind of get that how do we work as a team with the regional council and the leadership we need to have as the governors of the joint committee to guide that recommendation through. So almost that idea that this is not about the regional council having to go and as councillors be across all of this. Like we see the business case first, and it's like we put our faces on the LTP thing that says actually we collectively are the governors and regional councils collecting the rate.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, so there is a bit of team accountability. This is not about the regional council LTP, because if it's not on yours, then it's on ours too.
Yep.
So it's actually how we're doing that together.
Yeah, and this is the prompt to consider that is the case. Yep.
Yes.
It's just that you get it in the neck.
So through you, Chair, I think probably a recommendation from our committee in terms of when you know where you're heading with this, Ian, when the next meeting is. So that we
so we
take
can
the
heads up.
recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll keep you informed as yeah, just through you, Chair. I mean, obviously, I'm very aware of the timing and the fact that I need to start earlier than most other places because I need to get you to agree first, and then I need to go to the. That's why I'm starting now, essentially.
Thank you, Ian. Fantastic. Any other question?
Comment rather than a question through the Chair. I'm just pleased to see that the emergency management reforms, the select committee process is likely to be towards the first quarter of 2023, hopefully after February, when we're having to do the future for local government submission process by end of Feb's our cut-off for that one. Do we have any more idea of the actual dates?
Answer that one.
The bill is actually with government now. We believe the first reading could be December and it could be January, but we have extended the feedback from February to April basically, so you've got a good time to actually look at it.
Great, thank you.
There is a delay though in the actual guide, so the follow-on to that, because of our catastrophic planning, but I'll explain that later. So.
Any other comment? There is none. I'm happy to move, and Craig second. All those agree to receive the report, say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you. So we're on to the NEMA verbal update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as I was saying, the bill's on track as far as we're concerned. It obviously could get held up, I guess, depending on other bills that come up, and it may get dropped till next year, but it is certainly set for early next year as well. The flow-on effect, our CE has just instigated catastrophic planning at a national level with all the national agencies looking at how we would deal with a bad day for New Zealand, and that's obviously the Hikarangi fault, AF8. We've realised that there's no all-of-government approach in that aspect, so that was pulled together at very short notice. Ian attended from the 14th to the 18th of November, and we're hoping to come out of that with a bones of a national guide for a catastrophic event that regional plans can then build on, and we chose the Hikarangi fault as being the lead. The CEO is really happy with that. He's also scheduled a further catastrophic planning event, I'm not sure of the date, but early next year, focusing on AF8. The aim is to actually look at all our national plans so we can have a regional structure. Sorry, AF8 is an alpine fault, magnitude 8 earthquake that will affect all New Zealand as well. Then we're obviously going to look at the volcanic plateau and an Auckland volcanic scenario as well on that aspect. So there'll be, a swathe of regional and national plans for catastrophic events that should meld together. And we'll obviously provide some advice around regional planning for that. The other bit that we've also looked at is the guide to the plan. That has obviously slipped because of the catastrophic planning. That will probably go back to the end of next year, and that's actually how we're going to interpret the bill, how the roles and responsibilities sit for each group, and our national agencies and local agencies of how they work with the plan. And then that hopefully there'll be a structure around what we will do at a national event, what regional councils will do or regional groups will do and what local groups will do, and their roles and structures and responsibilities will be clearly set out and delineated in there. But as I said, that may slip about 6 months. The other aspect we've looked at the moment, we've realised that you'll be aware there's a mayoral relief fund, and it can be a maximum of 100k, but on that you did actually pay GST as well. That has now been removed, so you get the 100k or whatever it is, 20 to 100k, GST exclusive. So you'll get to spend all that money. We pray you don't get an event and actually have to have it as well, though. Let's be reasonable. Other than that, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you know, talking about resourcing and catastrophic planning, are we well resourced for these new projects that pop up? And are we getting support from the central government to be able to have the resource, have the FTE to do this? So how do we manage that?
So quite simply, we don't get any national resourcing, apart from sometimes we get resilience fund for specific projects, like Ramoko's Walk, for example. That will have to be as part of my considerations for the business cases to come, because if we're going to get a whole heap of national catastrophic plans, we will then need to do some regional planning on that. So how do we fit into that national plan? And that it's a bigger job than it sort of sounds, because it's multi-agencies, and I sat underneath the beehive for a whole week just about, and we only scratched the surface. It was just making agencies aware of the gaps that they had, let alone trying to actually plan forward. So that's going to have to be something to consider as part of that process.
Yeah, and is there ability there for us to advocate on a regional platform to say implementation looks like this for us? Yes. Where's the support?
Yes, there's definitely that opportunity, and we will develop the plan under the guidance of the national, whatever the national plan is, but it's going to be what suits Hawke's Bay, so it will be a Hawke's Bay plan. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, sorry, I should have said that we're very aware of the pressures that are actually on you. We're also very aware that we've increased our staff 300%, whereas no one else has, and that obviously brings a huge workload in with it. We're also trying to work with other government agencies in respect of their reviews, how you do it, the timeframes, because you've got the RMA, you've got 3 waters as well, and you've also got our Act. That's probably only 3. There's probably a zillion more that I don't know about.
50.
Yeah, that's right. So we're very aware that we don't overload you too much, and try and work together at the same time, so we can join some of these together and actually do that consultation at the same time.
So through the agendas, is it usual that we have an advocacy section that we get to discuss in terms of when there's new legislation or new pieces of work, how we advocate?
We haven't had anything for quite a while.
Okay.
The last thing would have been actually comments on the trifecta, which the timeframes were quite tight, so I worked with Rick and we pulled something together, and I think we might have sent it out.
Okay.
But if we've got the time, definitely should be trying to get us all together.
So we're agreeable that if timing suits, we can have this as an agenda item that we can work towards?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question or comment?
One more comment I should make is we've actually got 2 reamers assigned to each group. Now, it was myself and Jackie Cinco for this group. Jackie's taken a secondment to our international division for a year. So you've got myself at the moment, and we're looking at seconding someone else to support me to deliver, at least for the next year to you anyway. But you're stuck with me, and you'll get a new face as well.
Thank you. There are no other comments. I'm happy to move the verbal report, and Alex second. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Kia ora. And our minor item is, Craig, have you found your glasses? Right. Thank you to everyone for your contribution in today's joint committee meeting. I'm happy to call it to a close, and please join in with our karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki I hukaraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene, kia ora. Thank you.
Very good.
Well done, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Funded mandate. 3 times as many people tell us what to do.